Do we all remember when Avengers Endgame came out? If you saw it in the theaters, you probably remember that it was really crowded. In fact, as someone who worked at a movie theater for 3 years, I can confirm that this movie had the theater at maximum capacity for a straight month. And then months after, it was still really crowded. This says a lot about how movies play a huge role in our culture. In fact, during times like these when we're forced to stay at home, movies have come to the rescue to entertain us and help pass the time. So today I'm going to explain to you some of the key elements it takes into making a film such as this one. I'm going to be talking to you about mise-en-scene, cinematography, and then I'll move on to sound design and movies. So first we have mise-en-scene. This word refers to how the stage is set up. In fact, it's a French word that directly translates to setting the stage. Michael Murray says in a 2019 article called Mise-en-Scene and the Decisive Moment of Visual Legal Rhetoric, he says that with every visual work, the author will decide the content of the image, what to use, how much of what parts to include in the visual work, and how long each segment displays. So when you're a director, these are the sort of things you're going to be working with when it comes to mise-en-scene. So first we have the setting. Setting helps determine the time period, where they are, and the mood they're trying to achieve. Then you have props and costume design. These establish the personality of the characters, and then it shows what all is around them. So I guess that helps build up the setting. And then lastly, we have lighting, which is essential to creating specific moods. As you can see, horror movies take complete advantage of this, and they actually use the lack of lighting to create a creepy atmosphere. So setting the stage is important, but how do you capture what's on the stage while at the same time maintaining the same moods and themes that you originally intended? That's where cinematography comes in. Cinematography is everything you visually see on the screen. Everything is strategically placed to direct your attention to specific areas. Damien Capps says in a 2017 article called Cinematography as a Visual Storyteller, he says that cinematography plays a key role in capturing the mood and essence of a story. In many cases, the camera acts as a second narrator telling the story through visuals alone. Directors to mess with their cinematography adjust their camera angles, which is like whether it's pointing up or down, the camera distance, how far away the camera is from the subject, and then the movements, which include a simple one called the pan, which is just when the camera rotates. A lot of directors use cinematography to their advantage to establish their own style. This makes it easy for the audience to identify whether it's one of their movies. First example I'll show you is from one of my favorite movies since I was 10, called Fantastic Mr. Fox. Now, it doesn't look like much, but the thing with this director, Wes Anderson, is the thing that all of his movies have in common is that if you were to put a line down the middle of any scene in any of his movies, there would be sort of symmetry. It's like perfectly balanced. I'll show you a couple other things from the same movie. Symmetry. I find that really cool. It's a good movie. Another director that takes advantage of cinematography is Quentin Tarantino. Some of the things he does is what's called a crash zoom, which is when the camera zooms in like very suddenly, like really close to the subject. That's called a crash zoom. And then he also makes use of what's called wide shots, which is when a lot of the background is completely visible and the subject doesn't take up much of the screen. While cinematography is really important, there's still one more element that movies these days can't do without, that being sound design. Tom Wallace in the 2011 textbook, A Critical Introduction, he says, in narrative films, the words a screenwriter gives to a character, the music they listen to, and the sounds in their environment all contain a wealth of information. These are the three components of sound. The first component of sound is dialogue, which is anything that any character says. You can't really have a movie without dialogue because that would be kind of dry. The next thing is sound effects. Sound effects define a location. They help lend a certain mood to an environment. They also portray the environment's impact on the character. And then lastly, we have music. Music fills in parts that would otherwise be silent, like in between conversations. Music also helps the audience interpret a certain mood of a certain scene. Author Thomas Redwood, for a 2019 article called Aesthetics of Power, talks about sound in a documentary. He says that the function of the added soundtrack is to direct the spectator's emotional response. When sound is used creatively, it can create some pretty unique scenes. Unfortunately, due to the time constraint, I can't show you any scenes, but I'll just list them. So first we have Avengers Infinity War. If you remember the end, they actually used sound creatively by using the lack of sound. While that incredibly impactful scene was happening, they didn't have any music going on, which I think built to how hard the scene was to watch. Another cool scene from another movie called Baby Driver is the song Tequila, a super happy song, played over this heavy action sequence, and they made it to where every gunshot, every explosion was synced up to this song, which made for a pretty fun scene to watch. So we have now talked about some of the important steps it takes into making a movie. We talked about mise-en-scene, cinematography, and sound design. If you want to watch any of the clips that I talked about, I'll leave links in the post. So after hearing about all the hard work that gets put into making a single film, I hope we can all appreciate while we're watching a movie the dedication it takes to make even a bad movie. It takes a lot of work. So with this in mind, whenever you're buying a $9 movie ticket, think to yourself, is it really a ripoff to buy something like that? Thank you. The end.